Just point at me or something. Oh, Craig, we'll start in just a couple of minutes. People are just dribbling in.
Yep, not a problem.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Science on Tap, Minocqua, our Zoom edition. Thank you for coming. My name is Susan Knight. Science on Tap is an example of the Wisconsin idea, an idea conceived in 1905 that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. Our partners in Science on Tap are the Minocqua Public Library, Kemp Natural Resources Station, Trout Lake Station, and the Lakeland Badger chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association. And we all work together to bring you this Science on Tap. And Science on Tap is supported by a grant from the Brittingham Fund through the University of Wisconsin-Madison. There are 3 ways to watch. You can watch by Zoom, as probably most of you are. When you watch on Zoom, it is interactive, so that you can use the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen and ask questions. Or you can also watch on YouTube. It might be easier, but it's not interactive. It's not interactive, so you can't actually ask any questions. So go over to the Zoom if you want to ask some questions. or you can watch any event later. You can go to Science on Tap Minocqua, our website, and click on Watch Archived Videos. And our recent archived events also have a short movie as well. Before we get going tonight, I just want to say our next event is on November 3rd, and we're going to have Leslie Holland, an assistant professor and extension specialist, and she's talking about cranberries in Wisconsin. And though we are working on getting back to in-person events, November's Science on Tap will be a Zoom event. But what we want to do before I introduce our speaker, we would like to take a poll of everyone who's watching. And please let us know if you prefer to come in person. And it would probably be at Oak Fire, but we are still making those arrangements. So would you prefer to come to Science in person, or would you like to remain as virtual only? We'd like to know what our audience feels. So you should see right on your screen a poll, and just click your preference and we'll tally them up. And that will be very helpful to us to know how to go into the future. So we'll give you just a minute to do that. Okay, so tonight we are pleased to have Craig Rupp. He's an innovative engineer who's been working to join artificial intelligence with agricultural applications. Craig was raised on a farm in Iowa. He earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering at Iowa State, and he got a master's degree from Illinois Institute of Technology. Craig has over 30 years of engineering and entrepreneurial experience. He's worked with Motorola, John Deere, and Monsanto, and has started many of his own businesses. Craig is founder and chief executive of SABANTO, where he found a natural connection between his agricultural background and his degrees in electrical engineering. SABANTO is one of the first companies to put self-driving tractors into practice and the first to autonomously plant a farmer's field in Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, and Indiana. Okay, so here is your trivia question for Craig Rupp. Which of the following has been attributed to our guest? A, he was involved with Janet Jackson's Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction. Or B, he has a propensity to accidentally use the women's bathroom. Or C, he has successfully wrestled a wild boar. So you should see all those questions right up there on your screen. We'll give you a minute to make your preference, and then we'll see what everybody chose a little bit later. So we'll share those results in a few minutes. Okay, all right. And now, without further ado, here is Craig Rupp. He's going to give some introductory remarks before we get to the questions. So take it away, Craig. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you, Susan. Appreciate the intro, and happy to be with this Trout Lake Station group, and I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad to be talking to a group from Wisconsin. You know, although I spent a lot of time in Illinois, I grew up in Iowa, and I always thought that Wisconsin people are very much like the people in Iowa. So I've always appreciated your state. You know, I guess, you know, I started a company called 640 Labs, and we were acquired by Monsanto. And while I was at Monsanto, you know, they put us underneath the Climate Corporation. And I had started working really closely with a lot of farmers. And one thing, I guess a recurring theme, I would ask farmers, hey, what keeps you up at night? And time again, these farmers would tell me labor. And it's not the cost of labor, it was always the lack of labor. And they're really having a hard time finding capable, reliable labor locally. And so, I would always talk about autonomy with all these farmers, and, they always said, well, it's not a question of, of if, it's when it's going to happen. And back in 2018, I left the Climate Corporation, and believe it or not, I went and continued on my PhD. I've been chipping away for it for years. And I just decided that, I think autonomy is going to play a part in agriculture, and I want to do something about it. So I founded a company called SABANTO. And if you've ever started a company and sat across the table from a VC trying to explain as to why they should invest in you, the very first slide in your pitch deck must contain as to what problem you're trying to solve. And it's not necessarily one problem that I'm trying to solve. It's many problems that I think autonomy will solve. And, for starters, you guys, I think everyone in this group has been out to a farm. And if there's not one thing that you don't notice is farmers are really old. I mean, they are really old. And you start looking into the statistics. 1/3 of the 3.4 million farmers in the United States are over the age of 65, a time when they should be retired. But farmers, they die with their boots on. Another 1 million of the 3.4 million, almost another third, are between the ages of 55 and 65. And so let's just go through a really uncomfortable statistic. The CDC has the average lifespan of the typical male at 77 years old. So I'm sure everyone here remembers what they were doing in 1999. Well, 22 years from now, almost 2/3 of the farmers today are going to be gone. And who's replacing them? That's yet to be seen who's going to do that. The second thing is, and I don't have to spend much time on this, is just labor is crippling agriculture. And I don't think the H-2As are the answer either. You have to pay them, and you have to pay them quite a lot. You have to provide housing for them, and then you have to provide transportation for them either as well. And given COVID, when they leave, they can only spend 9 months. They leave for 3 months. God only knows if they're going to be able to come back. And a lot of farmers were worried specifically about that in particular. I guess the third thing is the costs in agriculture are insane. I remember sitting with a farmer, and he was telling me the rule of thumb is, it's $1,000 per horsepower. And then I'm sitting in the tractor with him in a 500 horsepower tractor, and it never dawned on me that you can buy a tractor that costs $500,000. And that tractor's worth, you can buy a really, really nice house for $500,000. And this is just a tractor that they use, a limited number of months out of the year. The other one, I know this group is really into sustainability, but I think it's myopic. There's a couple things when we talk about sustainability, I don't think we're taking into account. In particular, how are we going to make the farmers sustainable? And I'm all for, and every farmer I know, they're all for soil health, trying to make their operations sustainable. But I think a couple things that I think it's the elephant in the room. How are we going to make the farmers sustainable? And the last problem I'm trying to solve is I've never seen anything like agriculture in that all these companies make closed systems. And just like this group gets together and they share ideas and they exchange information, and you get into the equipment world, all these companies are they're closed. So if you develop a new technology, it's really, really hard for you to implement it on today's large equipment. what you have to do is you have to wait until these large equipment providers provide the IP that you need. And that really limits a lot of innovation in my mind. So I started a company, it's called SABANTO. And in a nutshell, we are a farming as a service company that enables total turnkey agriculture field operations using our supervised autonomous platform. So we're actually creating an autonomous platform. And what we're doing is we personally, my company is providing a service, but we're opening it up to third parties, independent contractors, and other people to take our autonomous platform and start doing farming as a service with that. So trial by fire, this all started, I decided to do this in October of 2018. I founded a company and I had this audacious goal that I'm going to go out in 2019 and I'm going to start autonomously planting. And we're going to figure out just what it takes to deploy an autonomous tractor in the field and learn about the path planning, find out all the hurdles. And so what I did, believe it or not, I went out and I leased a JCB 4220 that you see in that picture. It's a 220 horsepower tractor. And believe it or not, I never thought I would say this. I went out and I bought an 18-row, 20-inch soybean planter. And my intent was I'm going to throw this on the back of a semi and I'm going to travel around the country deploying this autonomously planting. And I am probably the only CEO that you'll ever meet that has a CDL because, I went out looking, what is this going to cost for me to hire someone to come with me who knows how to drive a truck? And, good luck finding that guy. So I became that guy and I went and got a CDL such that I could drive this equipment around. So we went around the country. And we went from Iowa to Nebraska to Minnesota, and then we came down and planted downstate Illinois, and we ended up in Indiana. And you see a video of it in the bottom right. And, I will say, I mean, there's a lot of hidden things in that video. That system couldn't be trusted. I was standing there with a kill switch. We did get that right, but we had a lot of software bugs. Our path planning was less than ideal. There was a lot of things that needed to be improved on that, to the point where even though it was autonomous, we sat one of us sat by the side of the field monitoring it via a wireless connectivity to it. And then the other person normally sat in the tractor seat in case something went wrong. So that was 2019, the spring in 2019. And then, meanwhile, I was out in California. I was looking for venture capital funding, and I did close a round in 2019 over the summer. And the first thing I did was I went back to Chicago and I hired, at the time, I hired 5 guys. But I currently have a staff of 15. And it was kind of interesting, the team I put together. All of them had an agriculture background. Right now, 7 of us grew up on a farm, but the remainder spent some time in an agriculture company working for Deere, Kubota, Hagie, Precision Planting, Climate Corporation. So they understand, even my software guys, they understand agriculture. They've never planted a field, but they understand, the population's difference between corn and soybeans. They understand what headlands are. They understand most everything about agriculture, but they've never planted a field before. And it's a really unique group of people. But we were funded by DCVC out of San Francisco and Cavallo Ventures, which is an investment arm of Wilbur Ellis, and then BioCrossroads, which is out of Indianapolis. And so 2019, things changed. the first thing I did was I came to my senses and I realized that, there's a problem having a company that has CDLs because once you're a company and you get a semi, then and you have a person that has a CDL, you get audited, you have to have random drug testing, you have to go through all the liability and licensing and getting a dot number. It was just, I looked at it like, I'm not solving the farmer's problem, because that's another thing they complained about is I have to get labor that has a CDL. I'm not solving the problem. What I'm doing is I'm inheriting it. And so what went through my mind is we're going to build something that does not require a CDL. And a guy that works for me and I sat down, and it's literally 16,000 pounds. And we went on a diet. And so that 220 horsepower tractor, that's out of the question. We're not going to use that because it weighs too much. And we started looking at these little Kubota tractors, and it was kind of funny thing. When we started looking at these little Kubota tractors, it turns out you can lease them for next to nothing. So I went and leased a fleet of small Kubota 5660 tractors. They're 60 horsepower and they weigh less than 6,000 pounds. And then I took that 20-inch or 18 row, 20-inch planter, and I cut it down and made 4 or 5-row planters. I bought 2 more row units, but I knew that instead of going out with a massive tractor, which compacts the ground, I'm going to go out with a bunch of little tractors. And then the thoughts were, if one goes down, I still have 75% throughput. If that tractor before goes down, I got 0%. And so there's some advantages of going small as well in that aspect. But also the biggest thing as well is I have a fleet of 4 tractors and 4 planters, and I can deploy these as a swarm, and I can push my software guys into developing the control mechanisms, the mission control, such that I can handle multiple implements and multiple tractors in the same field. And then, so the system, we're using a 3/4 ton truck. Again, no Class A CDLs, and our gross combined weight rating is less than 26,000 pounds. 10,000 for the truck, 16,000 for the load. And so when we went out with these planters, let's just take a look at the performance. Each system today can do about 130 acres per day. And our goal from day one was 160 acres, because if you notice, historically, when I think it was Jefferson set up the entire US in mile sections, and then they gave every farmer a quarter section, 160 acres. You go to some of these very large growers and ask them what their average field size is. It's 160 acres because of that. And the last spring, I guarantee you, we had the lowest commercial CapEx and OpEx planted acres in the United States, and that goes with the lowest compaction as well. I've never seen nobody today plants with this small of equipment commercially, and we did it this last spring. So that was 2019. So we went out in the spring of 2020, and this is that little Kubota, 60 horsepower Kubota. And we went on there and we added the valves for steering. It's got hydraulic steering. Unfortunately, they don't have the control mechanisms, and we put that on there. And we also put an extra, I guess it's called a Hydra Boost. And it's a system that gives us a little bit more hydraulic flow. These tractors are very inexpensive, but the hydraulics just weren't there for the vacuum system on these planters, and we added that. And we planted in 2020. Again, it was Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, and Indiana. And then it was kind of interesting when we came back from planting, then we started getting inundated by these organic growers. And it's something that kind of fell on our lap. And it didn't dawn on me from day one, but these organic growers, they have a big labor problem in the sense of you take a conventional grower, really all they do is they may do some tillage, they plant, they do an application, and then they wait for harvest. Whereas these organic growers are tillage, and then they field cultivate, then they plant, then they turn around and they'll tine weed, rotary hoe multiple times, and then they'll do multiple passes of cultivation. And it kind of was interesting in that just all these organic growers started coming out of the woodwork asking us. But we were in York, Nebraska, rotary hoeing in that video. And then we turned our attention to cultivating, and our organic grower called us. And what was interesting about cultivating was this one farmer wanted us to cultivate the same field 5 times. So you cultivate, wait 10 days, cultivate, wait 10 days, and continue on for 5 times. And what was interesting is I would say that I think our best software improved greatly, given that we were doing the very same field operation multiple times throughout this 50-day period. And then in the fall of 2020, this is when I started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. This is the 90 horsepower tractor. It's very similar to the 60 horsepower, just a little bit more power, and we chip it up to 125 horsepower. But we started doing tillage for farmers, and compared to planting and even cultivating, tillage is really easy. And what was interesting about tillage was we started running 24 hours. And this tractor and this tillage machine in the fall of 2020, we went 37 hours nonstop. That tractor did. We did have to stop it to fuel it, but that tractor never shut down over the course of that 37 hours, and it just ran all day and all night long. Then in 2021, we started taking over acres for farmers and working really closely, introducing autonomy into their process. And we went in and, for example, we took over 1,000 acres from a farmer in Nebraska, and we were doing everything except for harvest for this farmer. We went in and rototilled. We went in and did some field cultivation, and then we did planting, tine weeding, rotary hoeing, and then we cultivated it 3 times. And this was the tine weeding that we did for them. And that was a 40-foot bar on an M5 091 tractor. And if you can see, we did add a fuel tank on the side. And the reason for that was, you can only carry enough fuel for about 6 hours. And if you're the poor person who has to tender fuel to this tractor, you're going to be out there at midnight, and then you're going to be out there at 6 a.m. in the morning as well. And it starts to be quite a long day doing that. And then, so right now, this was taken a couple days ago. This is up in north of Des Moines, Iowa. We're doing cover crop planting for a bunch of farmers up there. And what we're doing is, if you see on the front of these two, there are seed tanks. And what we do is we're blowing seed back on these tillage rigs. And on the back of them is a rolling basket. And what we're doing is we're blowing seed right before it, and incorporating the seed that way. And then also this year, we've become brand agnostic. We're still going with the smaller equipment. This is about 170 horsepower. It's an MT545 AGCO Challenger. And if there's one thing we're good at is reverse engineering tractors and understanding all the aspects of the tractor. And so what we did was we jumped on an AGCO type tractor and we automated that. And then we have on back there, it's a 13-foot Veloci, Mosquito Veloci high-speed disc. And that right now, I don't think it's running right now because it recently rained in Chicago, but later this week, it's going to continue. And we'll do about, I'd say probably about 3,000 acres with that rig right now. So where are we going? We're going to build a network of farming as a service providers. And what we're doing is we're creating a marketplace where farmers or people with land can go to. And if they want a field operation performed, there's going to be a farming as a service provider in their area. And they're going to offer farming operations using our marketplace. And they're going to offer services using implements that are fine-tuned to a specific geography's agronomic practices. It's one thing we learned. This one 80-year-old farmer told me, you drive 100 miles and you're going to have different agronomic practices. And I see that when we're in Iowa, Nebraska. We've been in Missouri, Minnesota. We have been in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. And wherever we go, they use different types of equipment. They use different types of timing and agriculture practices. And what I want to do is I want to take a lot of the capital out of agriculture, and I want to be the most economically efficient farmer there ever was. And we're also working with local farmers as well. Introduce some rather large producers, introducing agronomy into their operations, or autonomy into their operations. Okay, with that said, I think Susan, so should I stop sharing or?
Sure, you can stop sharing.
Okay.
We have a wardrobe change. Speaking of Janet Jackson.
Okay.
So I'm Carol. I'm also one of the administrators here at Science on Tap, and we just had to switch out real quick. So here I am. Okay, well, thank you very much, Craig. And before we get to some of the questions we have coming in, let's find out some of those details about Craig's past. Susan asked, which of these is true? A, he was involved with Janet Jackson's Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction. B, he has a propensity to accidentally use the women's bathroom. Or C, he has successfully wrestled a wild boar. And from what we see in the poll that we took, it looks like everybody thinks that you successfully wrestled a wild boar. But the real answer is, Craig?
All of them.
All of them. Maybe he'll give you some details during the questions.
You want the details now or during the questions?
Shoot, let's hear it.
Okay, all right. We'll start with Janet Jackson. So when I was I owned a consulting company, and believe it or not, I used to be really good at programming this multi-core processor in assembly, and I used to make what are called biquad filters. And it's kind of this biquad filter. It's a generic building block for audio filters. And I was doing this job for this company, and they make soundboards. And I looked them up, and I couldn't. This is when the internet was at its infancy, and I was trying to find out, how does one buy one of these? And this company said, oh, well, you don't buy them. We build them for famous, singers. And really, and I'm like who? And they said, well, Janet Jackson's one of them. She's our customer. And so when I was watching the Super Bowl, the wardrobe mishap, her gasp was processed through my biquad filters. So, and then at the women's bathroom, I'm kind of if you can only imagine, I'm kind of absent-minded, if you will, and it's happened multiple times where I've been sitting in a stall in a bathroom and I hear click, 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 and I'm like, Jesus, that sounds like women's shoes. And I look down and I'm like, oh my God, I made the mistake. I accidentally came into the women's bathroom. That's happened more than once.
I was going to ask if it was more than once.
It's more than once. And my wife teases me incessantly about that. And then the last one, the wild boar. I was in Oklahoma with a bunch of friends, and there was a wild boar out there. And I grew up on a farm, grew up around hogs, and I used to wrestle hogs when I was a kid. It seemed like a thing to do. And I told my friends I could wrestle it to the ground, and I did just that. And so
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Thanks for those stories.
Yeah. It's
okay.
All right.
Well, yes, we'll go into the questions. As a reminder to everybody, you can find your Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and this is the window where you should write your questions in. And then a few of us here on station will be monitoring those questions, and we will present them to our speaker. All right. So the first question we have, Craig, is, can you describe safety features to avoid impact with things that move into the fields?
That is a really good question that I didn't touch on. So we have various safety systems on board. For starters, we have on the front, if you see, go to our Twitter page or our Twitter feed. If you look, you see on the front of our tractors, there are two little black boxes. One's an IR emitter and the other one's a camera, an IR camera. And what we're doing is it's a time of flight measurement. And what we're doing is we're looking for obstacles in front of the tractor. And tractors, luckily tractors do not go that fast, all things considered. They're not going like 60 miles an hour. And if we see an obstacle out in front of us, and that distance is relative to speed, if we see something out in front of us, we just stop. Okay. Now I will say that once in a while you can get a corn stalk that's that the combine missed and it looks like an obstacle and the tractor stops. We're working on improving our obstacle detection, and I will say that we are heavily relying on the autonomous vehicle industry. There's some really great companies out there. I think Luminar, Veneer is another one that are working on additional, increased safety systems. And I'm not going to build a tractor, and I'm not going to build a safety system, and I'm relying on those companies. We also have internally, we have smart software. If that tractor loses GPS, we stop. If it loses RTK, it stops. If we lose communications back to the cloud, we stop. If we veer off path by a certain amount, we stop. We geofence the fields. If you get within 4 meters of that geofence, it actually kills the tractor. And even if you jumped on the tractor and tried to drive it out of that field, it'll die, and you can't start it. So we've gone through and we went through what's called an FMEA, failure mode error analysis. And we've gone through, what would happen if this processor goes down? How's this thing going to stop? So it's a very disciplined way of handling safety.
Thanks. Another question is, what crops are best suited for this automation? How adjustable is the equipment to different crops?
So I'm a corn and soybeans guy, and most everyone on our team is Midwest agriculture. It is, I feel that it is very, I guess, portable on different crops. There will be a day when we're on the West Coast and maybe in the Southwest doing field operations there. It's just that there's so much agriculture around us. I think there's a lot of mundane tasks out there that I feel that we can do. I'll give you an example. These farmers up in North Dakota, they're growing sugar beets, and they wanted these evidently, and I've never worked on a sugar beet farm, but they defoliate the sugar beets before they harvest them. And evidently, that's a thankless job, and it's very mundane. And these farmers called me and said, "Hey, can you help us out here? Can you make an autonomous lettuce or sugar beet defoliator?" At the time, I'm busy with corn and soybeans. And so what I did was I have a team up in North Dakota who is building on our platform to extend it such that they can address opportunities like this. I have the tractor automated, I have the monitoring, I have the control of it. And if they want to take a sugar beet lettuce or sugar beet defoliator, and there is some control that they have to put on it. These kids up in Fargo are adding to our system and creating applications like that.
Cool. All right. What are the environmental advantages of autonomous systems?
Well, first and foremost, this goes back to my, I guess, one of my tenants. I think if you look at where we're at today, this equipment is insane, insanely large. Like, for example, they make 2,500 bushel grain carts. That is essentially two semis going down, two semi loads worth of grain on a grain cart, and you're killing the soil. Dr. Scott Shearer from Ohio State University has a really brilliant presentation he gave about how we're getting too big and we're starting to damage the soil. And if you look at where we got to this point today, it all comes down to equipment has grown in order to cover as much ground as you possibly can in, say, a 10-hour work shift. And so it's just logical that when you start bringing autonomy into the foray, it's going to increase that 10 hours to 24 hours. And horsepower is inversely proportional to time. So you increase that time, we're going to bring down the horsepower requirements, less compaction, and then lower costs as well. So I think compaction is one, and I think then if you've ever and I think you're going to get more fuel economy. You're going to save on fuel as well. And there's a lot of work being done as well with electrification of tractors.
Great, thank you. Are tractors still the optimal machine if things go automated? Are there other drone types that could improve sustainability?
The tractor's like the Swiss Army knife of agriculture, right? I mean, it's kind of interesting. If you look at the platform, you can put a loader on it. You can, it's got a 3-point hitch. It's got a PTO. It's got hydraulics. It's got, I mean, this is literally the Swiss Army knife. Now, if you look at, just the various implements, and let's just talk corn and soybeans right now. So the planters require, electricity, hydraulics, and for the most part, but ours requires a 3-point hitch as well. Some of this, I guess I'll be a little, when I have a lot of respect for hydraulics, and it's kind of odd. I'm an electrical engineer. Why would I even respect hydraulics? 1 horsepower is a hell of a lot of electrical power, and it was 768 watts, and that's a lot of electricity. Was it 760 divided by 12? 60 divided by 12 is 63 amps. Oh, that's a lot of current. We're going to have to get our hands around that. How are we going to provide that much energy if we electrify everything? And hydraulics, is a pretty efficient way of delivering horsepower. But to answer your question, I'm not quite sure. I think there's a lot of companies that are working with complete electrical systems underneath 40 horsepower. The problem is you start getting up to 90 to 100 horsepower. I mean, you're asking for a lot of battery. So what is it? Even that's 76 kilowatts, and for a 100 horsepower tractor, that's kind of a lot of energy, electrical energy. But that's not to say that necessity is the mother of invention, and we'll see.
All right.
I hope that answers your question.
Sure. You mentioned limitations to innovation because of idea ownership in the ag vehicle arena. How do you work within and around those limitations?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. So the first thing we do is we're pretty good at reverse engineering a lot of platforms. I myself and my team came from climate, and if you've ever, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Field View Drive, that little device that plugs into a tractor. I was the guy behind that at 640 Labs, and so I spent years sniffing around and understanding all the CAN messages between all these ECUs on this tractor. No, and it comes down to, if you look at technology, especially in agriculture, I mean, a lot of innovations, you're really barred from innovating on today's platforms. I'll give you an example. And I'm not saying it's only agriculture. It's automobile. It's the automobile industry as well. And I don't know if you can do this on Tesla, but you can't load if you want to run a certain application on your entertainment center in your car. You're not allowed to do that. And isn't it odd that the computer that you're watching this with, if you want to write a computer program or a program on that computer, knock yourself out. There's all these programming languages, and there's all these libraries. If you want to control the speaker, send a sound to the speaker, you could certainly write a program to do that. But once you get into the car, or if you get into the tractor, if you want to control something, you're barred from doing that. And I'm going to change that.
All right.
And
Is you
I have people working on it right now.
great.
Yeah.
Is your team integrating data from fine detail soil fertility mapping and the past season crop yield, plotting into fertilizing guidance?
No, but if you want to do that, I'd be more than happy to. If you want to somehow, some way measure soil, I will guide my tractor around your field, and then you can put anything you want on the tractor, and I will give you. All you have to do is download Linux free, Ubuntu free, and then download and open source ROS, a robot operating system, and you can run a ROS node, and you can run that on our system. Yeah.
Neat.
Mhm.
Do you save labor? It seems to me that a person must still be present to ride in and monitor the equipment.
No, we believe it or not, we're unsupervised. We ran 48 hours, and the 2 nights, everyone in my company was sleeping. These little tractors toiled away.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are you changing the education needs of modern farmers?
No, the biggest misnomer out there that farmers are, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think farmers are some of the most technically capable and welcoming group of people I've ever worked for. And they really are. Look at, you know what, and I'll give you the example. I'll give you a number of examples. Number one, look at GPS. Farmers, GPS guided cars really aren't a thing. Well, maybe Tesla's doing it, but that's just recent. Whereas farmers have been using GPS navigation for years, long before you and I were doing it in our car. The second thing is, believe it or not, I think some of the most innovative ideas come from agriculture. When you look at Henry Ford, when he did the assembly plant, you know where he got that idea?
Farmers?
Swift
Oh.
meat packing. They were doing the disassembly plant, right? And Henry Ford was always obsessed with the belts that they move grain with. He was absolutely obsessed with that. So I don't think there's re-education of the farmers. They're pretty smart guys. They really are.
And more gals becoming farmers.
I'm sorry. Yes. And when I say guys, I mean guys.
What other innovations in farm technology do you think is cool and part of the wave of the future?
Wave of, that's a hard one. I think artificial intelligence. And I don't want to harp on, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think artificial intelligence, or AI, or machine learning, I think it is a tool, and I don't consider it. There's a lot of people out there that they can't stop talking about it. I do think it's a tool, and I think it is going to be used more and more. And I'm starting to see companies like they're auto configuring their harvester using artificial intelligence to, given the output measurements, tweaking the parameters to get it in its ideal setting. There's going to be other applications. I'm starting to see a lot of AI being used for weed detection and elimination, and that might possibly change the entire industry as well. I mean, if you had a machine that could go out and kill every weed mechanically, oh my God,
Yeah.
the chemical industry they wouldn't like that now, would they? But that's yet to be proven whether it can live up to its challenge. So.
Great. We have one more question for you this evening. How many times has 911 been called about your driveless tractors? Tractor on the loose.
Did this come from someone who knows me? Because it has happened. It's happened twice. We've been visited by
Twice.
the police twice. They come and we got a 911 call. A farmer fell off the tractor or something. What's going on here? And so twice.
Were they in the same geographical location?
No, one was in Indiana and the other one was in Nebraska.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
at least
the cop was out there for like a half an hour. He's like, "This is really cool." And we were going on that, and he was like, "Oh, this is a great story." So,
yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much to Craig. And thanks everyone who participated, especially those who wrote in the questions, and to our sponsors, the Lakeland Badger chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, Minocqua Public Library, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, and UW Trout Lake Station, and the Brittingham Fund. Remember, our next Science on Tap will be on November 3rd, and we will have Lacey Holland talking about cranberries in Wisconsin. And if you want to sign up for our emails, please go to our website, Science on Tap Minocqua, and click Contact Us and leave your email address. We will